Welcome to the Home Team Sacramento podcast. I'm Josh Takimoto, and with us today is soccer coach and host of How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, Phil Darke. What's going on, Coach?
Oh, not much, man. Well, actually, that's not true. Lots going on, but that's all mostly good stuff. And just excited to be here. Just excited to finally get to, like we said, get to meet you virtually and get to talk to you about some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited for a couple of reasons. We just had Coach Jairus Roberts on. He's the head varsity basketball coach at Kennedy High School. He also has a podcast. You, like I said, have a podcast. In fact, you're the first guest out of all my podcasts that I do that actually has like the boom arm coming down with the mic, like myself. So
Nice.
I got to really step up my game today. I got another fellow podcaster that I'm doing this
You know,
with, so I can't slack off.
well, we can at least fake it. You got to look good. To the people out there. So
That's exactly it, man. You get it. You know how the game works. So
that's
and
right.
I'm really excited to talk to you for a lot of different reasons. But I mean, let's just start here. Let's start from the very beginning. Like, what's your athletic background, your coaching background, and then how did you basically end up to where you're at today?
Well, since I was a kid, I've just loved all sports. I soccer is my main sport. I played that since I was 4. But pretty much, if it has a ball and it's a game and it's a sport, I love it. And it's actually the last few years I've learned cricket and I've learned rugby and I've learned some other sports. I haven't played them, but just because I travel the world and I just want to make sure to be able to understand and enjoy and be able to communicate with people in the language of sports. So anyway, I've always loved it. I played baseball growing up. Like my son, it took me 5 kids to have my mini me. And my son now is a crack up because it's, what do you want to be when you grow up? Oh, professional soccer player. Well, what's your backup? Professional baseball player, right? And so that's basically what I was like as a kid, and played football for a couple of years, ran track. Well, didn't run. I did shot put and discus, but, did basketball for a couple of years as a 5'8" white dude. I didn't last too long, and since I couldn't shoot, there wasn't a whole lot of place for me on the basketball court.
Yeah.
And then just loved it all. I just loved playing. Went to college. Went to Cal actually for a semester to play soccer. Never ended up playing. Transferred to Davis, and then just absolutely loved playing intramurals. And so I figured, wait, I can play a bunch of different sports, not have to practice at all, and have really competitive sports. And so that's what I did. It was fantastic. And did that at UC Davis, and then went to Vanderbilt for law school and continued playing intramurals, won some championships, had a lot of fun. One of my claim to fame at UC Davis was I played 12 different teams my last quarter at UC Davis.
Dang.
And so, that's just kind of a microcosm of just, I just love playing. I love being on the field. And then after school, I started coaching. Actually, during my last year of law school, I started coaching and coaching off and on since then. So it's been a ride. It's a lot of fun.
Now, do you still compete like in indoor soccer or like Saturday night soccer out there, anything like that?
No, like I said, I have 5 kids, so
Yeah.
I've really just poured into them, and then I coach at Folsom High School with the girls soccer there. Just love pouring into the next generation. So I hung up my cleats from a playing for the most part. I still get it in when I shoot on the keepers to warm them up in the soccer games, kind of get my fix there. But
There you go.
it's too hard on the body. The older we get, it's just harder and harder every year. So I'd rather just enjoy it and be able to walk the next day, and then get out there on the field now. So I'll play pickup basketball here and there, but not going out in the
Okay.
adult leagues or anything.
No, I get it. I try to stick to that slow pitch softball. I haven't played soccer for quite a while. I kind of stopped playing soccer around right before I started middle school, and I kind of had high school. My freshman year, I stopped playing and thought about going, out for the freshman soccer team, and then just realized that these guys were much better, had more of a passion for the game than I did, and so I just kind of stuck with baseball. But at what point did you realize that like soccer was your favorite sport? Because I mean, dude, you're learning cricket, you're learning rugby. I mean, you're learning all these different sports, but I mean, your podcast revolves around soccer. You're a soccer coach. Like, at what point did that soccer light bulb go on? Where you're like, no, I love all sports, but like, I truly, truly love this one sport.
Yeah, I think it was that I understood it the most, and I was a goalkeeper.
Okay.
Again, as a 5'8" goalkeeper, not necessarily the prototype, but I studied the game. I learned the game. I became a student of the game because as a keeper, the best keepers are leaders from the back. And so I studied it. I studied my players. I studied the game. I studied my team. I studied other teams. And I just learned to love the game because you can learn so much about the game. I mean, that was later on in life. I wasn't necessarily thinking that as a 14, 15, 16-year-old. But I think because I studied it so much back then, actually, probably my favorite sport to play as a kid was football. I loved playing quarterback, but I played at Mission Viejo High School down in Southern Cal, and it's a powerhouse. And I just didn't quite make the starting lineup as quarterback. Never played, I just played on the playground growing up. But intramurals, I loved playing intramural flag football. So that was probably like my favorite sport to play.
Sure.
If I was honest with myself. Loved slow pitch softball as well. I really enjoyed that. So I loved all the different sports. But as I grew up and started, going to school and then really studying leadership and understanding about the different sports, that's what really caused me to really absolutely fall in love with soccer and what it can teach us. And when I coached soccer, I actually coached basketball at UC Davis, just at the junior high volunteer team, or volunteer coaching for a junior high in the area. That was fun. They didn't have a high bar on the basketball knowledge, fortunately, so I was able to do that. But then I coached, like I said, I coached during law school, a team in Tennessee. I was going to law school out there. And we actually ended up winning the first state championship of the small school I was coaching at. And I was an assistant coach on the team. I've loved being an assistant coach because you can really, dig into the people side of it and not have to do all the practice plans and all the nitty gritty, but be able to really teach the leadership stuff and on that side of things. So yeah, like I said, I just saw the ability. It's one of the quintessential team sports.
Sure.
It's truly a weak link sport. Malcolm Gladwell did a great podcast on that concept, that soccer really is you're as strong as your weakest link.
Hmm.
I think that's great life lessons there. And so, yeah, so that was just something that was where I'd say I really, started just loving what it can teach. And then I love watching it. I'm a Manchester United guy. I've got my Manchester United shirt on here. It's been kind of rough the last few years, but my youngest kids have actually never seen Manchester United to be one of the powerhouses. They're relatively, but not the top of the league. So I love watching, just love the global game. Like I said, I've been doing part of the bio you didn't talk about. I've been doing work in the orphan care world for the last 14, 15 years, which is why I've traveled the world. And that's the beauty of soccer too, is it's probably I think it is absolutely the world's most spoken language. And everyone, wherever you go, understands the game. And so you can really connect with anybody just by throwing a ball on the field. You can go out and play after the games. If you want to teach any lessons of any kind, you can use the game to be able to teach it. So that's really why I think that the podcast with coaching, it's just because it's the sport I know the most about. And I think it can teach us lessons that not every game can. So
that's interesting. And I like what you said about it's the language that, basically the entire world can speak, because that's one of my questions I had for you. Something I always find interesting talking to coaches is if you, go around our home team of Sacramento and different regions in the surrounding areas, very different backgrounds in those culture or cities, very different cultures, very different way of life in different cities. Like you go to Folsom, for example, very different way of doing things. And if you go down to say Burbank, very different. And then you go all the way out to Rockland, very different. And so in Del Oro, very different. Soccer, it's even bigger than that, right? Because you're potentially dealing with a variety of cultures, and the way they see the world is very different. So as a coach, specifically a soccer coach, where that element is definitely in play there. I'm sure that if you look at, again, excuse me, I'm not the world's biggest soccer fan. I must be honest with you. So this may sound
Hey,
dumb,
it's all right.
but I'm sure that the way that like the Germany team plays is very different than the Brazilian team, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, these different cultures. So as a soccer coach, how important is it for you to be aware of those different cultures and how they all come together, you know, potentially on one team, you know, depending on where you coach? Like how important
Sure.
is it for you to be aware of those things while you're coaching?
Well, I think it's important to know all that, no matter what sport you're talking about.
Sure.
But absolutely, uh, it's important for you to know your players. Period.
Yeah.
Right. So that's part of it. Right. As I talk about your culture, your worldview, how you see the world, just your background, whether you have, intact family, whether your grandparents are raising you, whether are you what demographics are you coming from? Folsom is pretty much um, very similar. I mean, your demographics are going to be very similar at Folsom High School. A lot of the team, especially on the varsity soccer team, they've played at some competitive level, so they're very likely going to be from the upper middle class, and really similar backgrounds, similar way. They see the world very similarly. That being said, they're very different people.
Yeah.
And that's really one of my jobs as the assistant coach is to study who they are and understand them. We do all kinds of different, we do just not only just getting to know them, but we actually do DISC personality assessments with each of our players,
Oh, really?
just to really understand who they are and how they're wired. We have a leadership team where we, have it's turned into about half of the girls, because a lot of them want to do it. They want to be part of the leadership team. So we get to understand them there in that leadership. We would do a half-day retreat with the leadership team and do mission, vision, values with them to understand what drives them, what their why is. It's not that we as the coaches step back and I facilitate it just because that's what I do, but they're coming up with it. They're owning it. So we actually see a lot of who they are through that as well. And so I would say, if I were coaching in a different place, it's the same principles. It's just you need to understand that if there's different styles, I mean, that really is the reality of high school soccer. These girls are coming from different clubs. And so while they're from the same similar demographics, and I say similar because they're not the same, and there are some who are outliers, but they have different styles of play. So you do need to bring that together. It's not like junior Bulldogs, right? Junior Bulldogs
Sure.
football team, they're learning that playbook from the
Right.
time they're 8 years old. They're coming up through it. If you're not in that, then you're at a huge disadvantage.
Right.
Well, with soccer, they're coming in from 5, 6 different teams, different ages. You have freshmen up to seniors, and that's a big difference. We had one freshman on our team, and they always have the skill if they're making varsity as a freshman, but they don't have the size. So you have to be creative with them, and you have to help them understand how to play against the Sierra Foothill League teams that are bigger, stronger, faster. SFL, the entire league in SFL this year was top 10 at the end of the season.
Wow.
That's 6 teams top 10 in the section.
Yeah.
It's crazy how good these teams are. And so when you're looking as a freshman, you're playing against girls 3 years older than you, that's a big deal, right? At this age.
Yeah.
So you're playing against fully grown women at that point.
Right.
And so to be able to understand that and coach that is to be able to come in with some very, very good players, to be able to say, okay, girls, you need to come together and play as a team. So it's our job to help you understand what our style is, but it's your job to help you to take all your skills, all that you've learned about this game, and fit it into this style of play that we're going to have here, and also learn each other and understand each other. We're going to help you as much as we can, but you got to want it too. So what does that look like? And so that's just where our motivation as coaches comes into.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really interesting too. First of all, it's interesting that you guys do the disc test. I've never heard a coach do that, which I think would be smart for any coach to do that for, you know, any sport, any level. Like I think that would be a really smart thing to do. So that's cool that you guys do that. Now with soccer, again, I know some people that are really into the soccer world and their kids are really into the soccer world. When it comes to like the high school level and that competition, is it difficult to, are there ever challenges bringing those different clubs together? Because from what I understand, those clubs, I don't want to say they're at a higher level than high school sports, but it's more, it seems more prestigious. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
so is it difficult to say like, well, my club coach said this was like cool, but you're playing here for my team, so we have to, figure this out. Like, is there that
Yeah.
battle?
I wouldn't say it's a battle. I think there
Okay.
is a stigma in soccer. It's funny because soccer is one of the few sports where high school soccer there's a stigma. Girls aren't, and the boys, both sides are not recruited out of high school for the most part.
Okay, that's
There
what I
are
was thinking.
some
Yeah.
there are some JCs, some other smaller schools that will come and watch high school games. Like, we've had William Jessup's come out. I know Folsom Lakes here college, like they're coming out to our games.
Sure.
And it's because we're a really good team and they're wanting to come in and recruit some of these players. But for the most part, you're not getting Stanford coming in to watch a high school, soccer game. They're going to the tournaments, they're going to Vegas, they're going to the ECNL showcases, they're going to all these different places that are out there. And that's what they're doing. So interestingly, the program at Folsom for the longest time, the head coach, he's like, we get who we get out here. And they come, and most of the girls aren't wanting to play senior year. They rarely show up because they're either burnt out or they are just doing club and focusing on that. They don't want to get hurt for college. Well, I said, I don't accept that. Like, I said, that might be true, but will you give me some chance to try this? Which is why we started doing DISC. It's why we started doing the leadership team. I actually am a certified DISC consultant. So I encourage anybody who's interested in it, reach out to me, because I'd love to help, get your team doing it. I've done that at Baylor University, at University of Houston, Dallas Baptist University, some other universities out there. I've done it with their teams and
Awesome.
had great success with it. But that was some of the things that we've started putting in to say, well, how can we make this so that we're actually training you about life? Soccer is really secondary. Now, the reality is we've had tremendous success. I mean, we made we lost to Oak Ridge right before COVID in the final of CIF. We lost to them in the semifinals this year in CIF. It's very, very good success. But what I take more pride in is the fact that these girls are learning about life. They're learning about leadership. They're learning about their why to discover. That's what we do with our leadership team. We say, what's your why? What's your personal why? Why are you here? Why are you playing? Why are you, what are you in life? Our mission statement for our team is to help our team and others to flourish in soccer and in life. Right? It's not just about the field. It's about life. What does that look like? And so we went from being a relatively toxic program, because it is hard when you bring in these girls from all over these different teams, and the ECNL, kind of have that, well, we're the elite and these other players aren't as good as us. And so there's this air about it, right? Without speaking into it. If you just let it go, that tends to happen because, we're humans, right? And so that's kind of human nature, is to stick with those who and who you'd like you. But we said, let's break down all the walls, let's blow up the cliques, and let's say, no, we are a team. How can we get to know each other more? How can we do more, gather? How can we do more bonding events, just different things? They go on hikes together. They're doing, we're doing dinners together during the season. And just to be able to say, let's let's experiment, see where this goes. And sure enough, 3-4 years later, well, now it's actually 5 years later since we kind of first started implementing things. And my daughter was on the team at first, so I kind of had some inside information as well about the clicks and the toxicity and all this other stuff.
Interesting.
It was my little spy behind
Yeah.
the scenes, and I saw it. I just used her to kind of confirm what I thought.
Sure.
And then fast forward to this year, we had 12 seniors on the team. And 21 or 22 spots, 12 seniors, going from probably 3 or 4 every year to 12. And so I saw this as a massive success. These were girls that had burnt out on ECNL and at the comp level. And they said, we want to play high school because we still love the game. And we just love each other. Like, we don't want to miss this. And so it went from girls convincing each other not to play to girls actually convincing each other, no, you got to come out and play this year. And, for some of them, they're freaking out because they have AP tests and they have this and they have that. And, we say, look, this is a commitment you're making. Now, if there are certain things that you need to miss, whatever, we'll talk with you about it. But for the most part, no, you're committing to this because people are depending on you and you need to be depending on them too. So anyway, so that's kind of the the method behind the madness of what we're doing and what we've been able to do over the years. But it's something that is very intentional, and it's to say, all right, what really matters here? Most of these girls, the vast majority of these girls, I think we have 3 that are playing in college next year. The rest are not never, they're never going to play competitive outside of maybe intramurals, maybe
Sure.
some adult leagues, but I want them to love the game and take lessons from the game, which is why I do How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast. Take lessons from the game and use it in their marriage someday, use it in their parenting someday, use it in their work someday, just be able to use it in their relationships, because we can learn so much from sports. But I feel that a lot of those lessons are being squeezed out of these kids because all they're focusing on is, we want to get a scholarship, or we want to win the next tournament, or we want to beat out this person, or we got to make the A team, or we got to, whatever that goal is, that's what blinds them to all these other lessons. And I fear that a lot of the coaches aren't teaching those lessons either, and aren't pointing them out during the practices and games and other opportunities that they have.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny that you said all that, because that was awesome. But one of my questions for you was like, how do you implement character development in your practice? Because we hear that all the time. Like, I mean, between this podcast and everything I had done for the last 10 years with Character Combine, the thing that you're always talking about and hearing is how coaches are focused on character and character development. But rarely did we talk about, like, well, actually, like, practically, what are the steps that you're taking to actually do that? Like, that's the part that interests me, because it's cool to say at the end of practice, hey, do the right thing, and then just
Right.
let them go. It's like, well, that's cool, but anybody can say that. Like, what are you giving them the tools for their toolbox to take with them through the rest of life to
Yeah.
actually be able to implement those things? And so it's great that you guys are doing that, and you guys make this not just a, hey, let's make sure we say something about character at the end of practice, but it's, hey,
Right.
we have like a whole piece of our program is built on this idea of integrity, character, leadership, making these the best possible people we can possibly make them before they leave our program. And I think that's amazing. And I wish I
That's
could
right. And
remember.
let me say one more
Yeah.
thing to
Yeah,
that too.
please,
I
please.
think there's the big things that are the obvious things that we're doing too. And then I just want to say for others, there's those Keystone habits. I don't know if you've ever read The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg, great book, but it's talking about these Keystone habits that if you do these things, they actually unlock other habits that
Yeah,
the girls or the boys or whoever you're coaching will be able to do. And some of them are a lot of small. Atomic Habits is another great book.
sure.
James Clear wrote that book, but that's again talking about the small things that lead to the bigger things, right? And so the 2 rules, and I've talked about this on my podcast, but the 2 rules that I have that are somewhat of those Keystone habits, or the little things, whichever way you want to talk about it. One is wear shin guards every practice, because there's, for whatever reason, when I was a kid, you didn't even think about going on the field without shin guards. But for whatever reason, now these kids think it's cool to not practice with shin guards. But the girls say, well, why do we have to wear shin guards? Oh, you're such a old whatever. And I said, well, there's a couple reasons for it. Number one is you play harder when you have shin guards on, and you play like you practice. And so the reality is, and if you feel they're uncomfortable, well, you better get used to them, because you have to wear them in the game. So that's one. But so that's absolutely the case. And I go too, I don't want to get hurt. Like, it's just simple. Like, it's just
Sure.
stupid. Why would you risk that? And we don't get you in the game because you didn't want to wear. But there were days where the girls would show up and I'd watch, and they'd put their stuff on, they'd kind of test it, and they'd have these, well, I don't have the right socks, coach. And I said, that's not my problem. And so sure enough, they'd find someone that had socks that would be able to have, be able to put the shin guard in. A couple other practices, they didn't have them on. And, I kind of said, all right, you can do your warm up right now, but I better see those out there. And they, sure enough, throughout the season, it became more self-policing. The second rule was no profanity. And again, the head coach kind of gave me a look like, I didn't know about that one. I didn't sign on to that one.
Yeah.
But he agreed. I mean, because they're kind of like snickering, whatever. And I said, well, here's the deal is, we're here to teach you life. We're here to teach you character in class. And look, if you're going out there in the real world and you're going for jobs, you don't want to not get a job because you have a potty mouth. You don't want to not get a job because when you go out to dinner, you're throwing F-bombs just because that's your natural who you are. You will there's jobs you won't get because of that. And there's jobs that that you might get fired from if you do those things. Now, it may be that that's the culture of a place. And if it is, well, then you can do whatever you want to do, but you're never going to get in trouble for not doing it.
Right.
So that's the thing that we're teaching them. And there's really no place for it. If you're out there on the field, there's chances you could get red cards with that. So we're here to teach you these things that make you think about other things as well. So it's not just about the rule. It's about what is the rule? What's the point of the rule? And what can you learn from that rule to take beyond the game? And so that's one of those are a couple of the things just as examples of that, where, that's not just one thing we say at the end. Here's a character thing for the day.
Right.
You could do that. I'm not saying that's terrible or bad to do. It's just that's fleeting. The girls just say, okay, whatever, I'm just going to go on and go home. But these other things are things hopefully they'll remember. And then it's just consistency. It's just me. I have to be consistent too. If they see me with my kids, if they see me with my wife, I better be opening the door for her. I better be respecting her. I better be showing her these things that I'm telling them that I expect them to be doing. I better be honoring my wife, my kids, to be able to live it out because they're watching. And that's the thing is, that's what we tell them too, is people are watching you. Everybody is leading somebody. So just, whether you like it or not, you're leading people. So take that responsibility to heart.
Absolutely. I mean, your words are only as powerful as the actions and the way you live, right? And if you don't back it up by the way you live, then I mean, it just sucks all the power out of the words, and they kind of look at you like, okay, we'll let you finish, coach, but we know, this is all just a mirage, right? It's a facade here. No, I think that's great, man. And it's something too, just on a practical level, you're talking about all these, job opportunities and things that will come down the road for these athletes. One of the things, and I wish I could remember where I read this, but they were saying, if you look at all of the top performing professionals in whatever career path or whatever profession, most of them have had some form of an athletic background. Now, that doesn't mean that they played Division I or professional. Like myself, they may have been a bench warmer in high school, and that's the closest they ever got to really competing. But because they still had all of those disciplines and those concepts ingrained in them as an athlete, it benefits them down the road. And so even if they're not playing a sport, one day when they're a professional in some career, it's going to pay off. So even like you said, the shin guard thing, huge. That consistency with that lesson is huge. And eventually, and it might be one of those things we've always talked to coaches, they may not understand that right now, but I'm sure you get a bunch of phone calls from former athletes where it's like 10 years down the road, they're like, hey coach, remember that thing you used to do? I get it now. Like, it's paying off right now. And that's a cool thing. And that being said, for you, when you were competing, did you have a coach that maybe implemented and really stressed certain lessons that you still use today?
Actually, it's funny. The one thing that I'll never, ever forget is, and it's not a life lesson, but it goes back to some things stick, right? And I hope the character and life lessons are what's sticking with the players for me. But my son's starting to play baseball. It's actually why I'm wearing this Phillies hat right now.
Okay.
My son's on the Phillies, so I told him I'd buy the hat since it's my name. So I told him, hey, you're on my team. And he's looking at me like, what do you mean? You like the Mets? And I go, no, Phillies. Phil. He's like, all right, so whatever. He's like, yeah, whatever, Dad. So he's 10, so it's still kind of cool, but not totally cool anymore.
Yeah.
So, but he has his elbow down, and I'm like, get your elbow up, dude. Like, get your elbow up. You got to get your elbow up. And the reason is my first coach I ever had, when I was probably 5 or 6 in baseball, whenever I started, he played for the 69 Mets. And anyway, he was a great player, and he would always say, chop wood. You got to chop wood. And just always going down. And so that was one of those things that stuck. But again, and it was something I actually saw him at my mom actually passed away recently, but it had her memorial service. He was there, and he came up, and I that's the first thing I thought of when I saw him, but those are the things that these coaches do, things that we will remember. I unfortunately, I will say that I didn't have necessarily guys. My high school coaches were not the character guys. They were the guys that I got out there and run 5 miles and, do whatever. But I did. Interestingly, I talked. I did the chords for the varsity football team as a freshman and a sophomore. So during on the sideline during the games and stuff. So I was able to hear their encouragement of the players, and I just went and sat down with one of the coaches from that team, and he actually was one of the assistants for Urban Meyer at Ohio
Oh,
State and Florida and Utah.
wow.
And he always talked about how, we got to treat the players need to treat themselves and the team as if they're a CEO. And he had all these different things that he did. And it was just really cool that just the different things that to listen to him and talking about the different impact that they had. But I didn't have one outside of my dad, but I think that was just because my dad was coaching me. I
Sure,
don't know
sure.
that there was anything that he did or said that was just absolutely memorable. And maybe that's why I'm so intentional with it, is because I do want to say, like, there are lessons that I've learned that I've just taken out of it that I want you to be able to take on and get a head start in life using this great tool that we have. And like you said, I think it actually may have been, I just read the book. I don't know if you read Shay Haddow's book, but um it talked about that in there, where like 80% of CEOs were former athletes or something. But
Maybe she
anyway,
mentioned it on one of our previous
yeah,
podcasts
maybe
with
she
her. Maybe
mentioned
that's
it
what it
in a
was. Yeah,
podcast episode or something. But yeah, I mean, and that's the reality. And I know there's a lot of CEOs. There's a lot of people that I've talked with. I know that I look at that. If it's not a former athlete, team athlete, actually, I struggle to hire them because I'm a big team player. I'm a big collaborator, and it's not like I won't, but if you're not a team player, then I will ask a lot of questions. I mean, you better have been on an orchestra or some sort of team that you're learning about team, because otherwise, oftentimes there will be authority issues. There will be other things where you're not seeing the value of synergy. You
right.
won't see that, you play a role in the team. Like even in baseball, which is it's a team sport, but it's also individual. Like it's a both
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
right? I was able to last night, my son's team scored. It was they're majors, and it's it's not quite the great baseball yet. There's a lot of
sure.
walks and there's a lot of whatever,
A lot of
but
wild
it
pitches.
was
Yeah,
super exciting. And there was a kid that, you wouldn't have expected to be the hero, steps up in the bottom of the sixth, 12-10 with 2 men on, 2 outs, full count. I mean, like literally it was like the backyard ball, and you
yeah.
could hear the announcer, full count, to see what happens. And he hits an inside the park home run. Like he
Oh,
hits
no
you just
way.
right down the first base line. He's jamming around the bases. I say that it was probably
Yeah,
E3, and then he just ran all the way around the bases. But
yeah, it's all right.
whatever the case, it was just eruption, and the coaches but I was so glad to hear after the game, the coaches come up to the kids and they say, this is a great lesson to never give up. This is a great lesson to, you never know who's going to step up and be that hero of the game. But we're a team, and it took all of us to get here. And it was just this great teachable moment. And I was so grateful that my kid's coach is doing that, and then to be able to
Oh yeah.
reinforce it in the car ride home is fantastic. And just so anyway, yeah, sorry I don't have like some remember the Titans coach that I had in the past. I feel like all those guys, are Gene Hackman
Sure.
and Herb Brooks
Right.
and I forget Denzel's coach, what you probably remember, but
No, I'm
remember the
blanking on it.
Titans, such a great Coach Boone. Was it
Coach
Coach
Boone.
Boone or was
Coach
that the
Boone.
other coach? Yeah,
Herman
yeah,
Boone. There you
yeah,
go.
Herman Boone.
Yeah, no,
So
that's okay though.
anyway,
No, it's okay.
yeah,
And that's good to hear though. I think that's good to hear the flip side, because usually the coaches we talk to, they have, one moment or one phrase, or just in general, the presence of that coach had a major impact on their life. But I've always said a coach can have a tremendous impact on an athlete's life, good or bad.
yeah,
We like to
yeah,
focus on the good, but I mean, the bottom line is I still know athletes that I played with from like, pony ball days that still are
mhm,
griping. I mean, these are 30-year-old men now, still griping about the one time where this coach did that. It's like, man, you're still really
yeah.
holding on to it.
Oh yeah,
But still, it's really had that kind of impact on them. So, like you said, even if it's something as simple as, hey, chopping wood, you remember that. And it just,
yeah,
it's something that further proves that what a coach said is really valuable. And the words you're using, like we can't take those things lightly because they really do have a major impact on our athletes. So,
Yeah.
man, I love everything you guys are doing. I know we have just a little bit more time, so I want to make sure I get to your podcast. But before we do that, Ted Lasso, man, like I said, I'm not a diehard soccer guy, but I love that show. Me and my wife love that
Yeah.
show. And I feel like, I mean, you would better, you would be able to tell me better. Like, it seems like they do a really good job with the culture of soccer on top of all of the great life lessons. And obviously it's a hilarious show, but
Yeah.
it's cool that you use that so much in your podcast. I think did you do a series on that for a while?
We have, yeah, we kind
Yeah.
of have halftime shows and our post-match shows
Yeah.
every 5th episode and 10th episode of the season. Because we have 10 episode seasons, and so the
Yeah.
5th and the 10th episodes. And so for 5 of those episodes, we did how Ted Lasso explains leadership. And so it was basically the leadership lessons from season 1, and we did 2 episodes at a time. So yeah, it was a blast. Paul Jobson, my co-host, he's the former Baylor women's coach, soccer coach, and so we had some really good conversations, and had the excuse to watch the seasons again as well. So that was pretty easy research.
I was gonna say, it's research. You have to do it, right?
Exactly. I had to. I just said, sorry, hon, I gotta watch it. And she loved the show too.
Yeah.
And so it's a great show. For so many reasons. I think it was what the country needed, I think, during that time too. It was,
Sure.
during COVID, just some lighthearted fun, but great life lessons. Again, it captured a lot of the life lessons that we do talk about on the podcast, that I talk about with my team. These lessons, I mean, even on our team, be a goldfish. And what was cool about my team is we had this trust and this vulnerability as a team, that even when we're saying that as the coaches, because we had a bad loss that we just played terrible or whatever, and the coach like, hey, just be a goldfish, just go. And one of the girls like, don't we need to though think about it a little bit and learn the lessons from it that we can take from it? And it was like, yes, we do.
That's awesome.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And then let it go, right? And on that note, like I actually, and not Ted Lasso, but I sang "Let It Go" to the team, because they're like, "You'll never sing it. You're not going to sing it." So I actually went and memorized the couple verses and sang it. But those are the things that hopefully they'll remember. They were dying. They were totally like embarrassed for me, but then they posted on Instagram and say whatever, and it was a lot of fun. So you can actually go check that out. It wasn't the best rendition. It's not going to make any American Idol or anything, but
that's awesome.
But yeah, going back to Ted Lasso, I think that Ted Lasso is fun. The soccer, I think the soccer that actually is on the playing is intentionally cheesy.
Right. Sure.
But they have Arlo White, who's an actual announcer. They have a couple other guys who are the actual people that are announcing and doing some different things. I mean, who can't love Danny Rojas? Football is life.
Right.
I mean, to the character development, the different aspects of it, going, like I said, in the orphan care standpoint, to see the fatherlessness issues with Jamie, not so much fatherless, but his dad really wasn't present. And that impacted a lot of his life. And to see that reality playing out through it, see, Roy Kent and all the issues there. That's what I love, just the human element, the human side of it. The Ted, all of the issues he's going through, but how he's continually wanting to find the good in all of it, and doesn't want to bring anyone down. So yeah, I think it's a great show. If you're wanting to see the true inner workings of a football team, that's not the one to do. Go check out an All or Nothing on Man City, or even though it pains me to say that as a United fan, but it's one of the best documentaries I think ever, is that Man City All or Nothing special. There's one on Tottenham as well. Those ones obviously are the real deal, but Ted Lasso is a lot more fun. It's got something for everyone. If you're one of the 5 people out there who hasn't watched it yet, definitely check it out. And I would say that. And then, if you want to kind of mine some of those leadership lessons with me, you can go check out those episodes that we did, and you can reach out to me. We can grab lunch or something. Since this is a Sacramento podcast, we can send me an email. We can grab some lunch or coffee or something. I'd love to talk to you about all these things, whatever we're talking about here.
That's great. Yeah, no, it's like I said, like you said, it's a fun show for sure. And I think my brother described it best. He's like, man, you can't watch it. It just like brings a smile to your face. Like every time you watch it, just like you said, the lessons, except for Nate. Nate's made a lot of enemies recently.
You
It's gonna be interesting to see what happens in
Nate's one
season
of the
4.
most. It was crazy because he was the most lovable Nate the Great in season 1, and they slowly turned the corner. Not to spoil it for anyone out there, but yeah, it's a bummer. But then again, it again goes back to the human nature, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's pride and it's his insecurities that are coming out. And that's powerful because you saw it with his dad. You saw it with, again, another father wound, right? That the realities of the father wound here. And that's what the other side of it is. Ted really trying to love his son from afar, and in the midst of that and that relationship, which is, and then Roy with his niece, and these different relationships that are there, that you see the reality of it, and the hurts and the wounds that do have consequences, right? And so just see that with Nate, that he really needed that affirmation, and so he read into things in ways that weren't necessarily true, but that happens all the time, right? And that's just, again, that's one of the things, again, with that show, and then bringing in the psychiatrist in season 2, and all the things that draws out. That was a whole nother aspect with the mental health issues and all the things that are going on nowadays. So I think that it did a really good job. And I love watching the interviews with Brett Goldstein, who plays Roy Kent, and Beard, I forget his name, his real name, but they are the writers, and they're talking about how some of these ideas came up, and some of the, like, Roy Kent wasn't even, or Brett wasn't even going to play Roy Kent, and then he just felt Roy Kent in him or something. It's just kind of cool how it came together, because it's just kind of one of those, like, right place, right time, the right show for what we needed. Like your brother said, it just can't not smile. And somebody said, like, oh yeah, someone's a big fan. I go, who has watched it and isn't a big fan? I have yet to hear anyone watch it and not love it. Or maybe they're afraid to say they don't love it, because
they might be.
Really does have something for everyone. It's just, it's kind of like, I don't know if you saw The English Game, but it was made by the makers of Downton Abbey. I watched about half of Downton Abbey episode, and I just couldn't watch it. I know some people will give me hate mail for that, but both my wife and I were like, but The English Game actually is the same makers, but it's about the beginnings of the FA Cup in England, the biggest tournament in England for football, English football, soccer.
Okay.
And so it's got the sports, and it's got the drama. It's kind of got something for everyone.
A little bit of everything.
Ted Lasso is the comedy version of that drama side of things. That was just great story. So anyway, I mean, we could talk for hours about Ted Lasso, but we won't.
Oh, for sure. And I just want to correct myself. I think I said season 4 is coming up. Actually, season 3 is coming up.
Season 3.
I was ahead of myself.
They say it's only going to be 3 seasons, so that's a bummer. But it is what it is.
We'll see. We'll enjoy the ride as long as it lasts. But it's a fun show for sure. And like I said, I just love that you guys took that and used it for your podcast. Which, like I said, before we get out of here, I want to make sure we talk about the podcast a little bit. When did you start it? Why did you start it? I have an idea why you started it, but it's kind of in the title, right? But like when, why, and then what's the response been like since you guys started it?
Yeah, so I started it, actually, it started well before I recorded the first episode. It started as a book idea. So I wrote a book in the orphan care world called In Pursuit of Orphan Excellence. I had 15 co-authors on the book. I brought it together, researched all over the world, brought together this book. And then I was asked to do a talk after writing a book, because of course, when you write a book, everyone thinks you're an expert in that area, even though you just wrote a book with 15 other people on it. But whatever the case,
That's true.
I got asked to do a talk. And so I was like, what do I do a talk on? It was a 10-minute talk, and I did a talk called The Gospel or How Soccer Explains Orphan Care was the name of my talk. And I did it with basically 2 lessons on how soccer explains, how it was basically talking about collaboration, talking about working together, talking about, weakest link, right? That we're only as strong as our weakest link. So kind of those ideas. And so I
Sure.
did that 10 minutes, whatever. But then it just kind of triggered in my head, hey, what about another book like the one I just did, except now in the soccer world, of the leadership lessons we can learn from the game. I had a bunch of people I started calling around, some of my friends who are pretty well known in the soccer world, and they were on board with it. But then I just thought, you know what? It's a distraction from all the work that I'm doing in the orphan care space. Not the right time. That was back in 2015. I went back and looked on when I wrote that proposal, and it was 2015. So
Wow.
fast forward a few years, and I'm going through all these different transitions in the nonprofit space, in my organization, and so on and so forth. And my organization is based on traveling the world and training people on best practice orphan care, organizational health, some other things. And I just couldn't travel, right? I mean, and the training wasn't happening because we couldn't go be in person with people. We tried to get it online and whatever, but I had some time. And I mean, I have 5 kids still, so it was really busy, and all of them were
Sure.
home over COVID. But we weren't going all over the place. We didn't have soccer going on all over the place. We didn't have all these things.
Hmm.
So I just called up a buddy of mine and said, hey, I got this idea for a podcast. And he was he's a big Manchester United fan as well. It's
Okay.
not my current co-host, is a different one. And he said, why don't we just do a podcast where we talk about Manchester United and leadership lessons through that? And I was like, all right, that sounds fun. So we started kind of noodling on that idea. And I just said to him, I go, look, I don't really want to spend that much time doing something if it's not going to have lasting impact and
Sure.
really legacy impact. And just talking about, there's plenty of podcasts out there just talking about Manchester United, right? I don't want to be that one. I want to be something where we can actually impact lives, help people understand how we can use this game for good. And I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but I just started interviewing people. So Paul Jobson, who's my current co-host, was my first interview. Fun story for another day on how we actually connected, but we actually talk about it on the podcast. If you want to go hear that, you can go back and do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a few episodes in, I had this other co-host. We actually started doing it like that Manchester United thing, and I just quickly switched. He ended up having some personal and family issues that he wasn't able to continue, and I just kept interviewing people. And then I asked Paul to be my co-host, and it was really just the idea, excuse me, of these leadership lessons. I mean, what we've been talking about this whole conversation today.
Yeah.
Just how can we take these lessons? And I just thought the original plan for it was to just have people that are in the corporate world, CEOs, leaders of different organizations, leaders of families, different people that were, former soccer players or other athletes,
Sure.
and talk to them about how they're using the lessons learned from the game in their leadership in the outside world. Well, it quickly transitioned to really anybody and everybody, and it turned into a lot of coaches, a lot of other people. I actually interviewed Corey Close, the women's basketball coach at UCLA,
Oh, cool.
because she's a great leader, and talked to her about some stuff. Talked to a lacrosse coach who's just an incredible leader. John Yeager is his name. I talked to a referee who wrote a book on baseball. Actually, great book called At the Bat: The Strikeout That Changed America. It was all about Casey at the bat and the
Oh,
poem. And he
interesting.
wrote a cool fictional story about that. But he was an
Very cool.
umpire and a referee for field hockey and basketball. And so we talked about referees and angles, and how we see things from different perspective in life, and how we can learn that and from refereeing and stuff. So it just turned into this great just conversations with incredible people about really important topics. I mean, I just did an episode on, there was at Oak Ridge recently in the
Right.
regional final, there was that racial slur during a shootout. And so
Yeah.
I talked for
Terrible.
15 minutes on that, and just, the implications of that, and how we can avoid that, and what does that look like, and how we as coaches and we as leaders can take the reins on that, and some other stories. And so those were all things that I just wanted to, I can touch on. That's what it's evolved into. And that's what I love, is now, because it's now at a point where people trust that the people we get on, the content we produce, it's going to be worth their time. And that's something I take very seriously, as I know you do as well. As I don't want to just get anybody on. I don't want to just talk about anything. I want to make sure intentionally that what we're talking about is going to help people. Now, not every episode will help every person,
Right.
but the reality is I want to make sure that what we're putting out there, like I would take the time to listen to, and I don't want it to be any longer than it needs to be. So the impact, the numbers are decent, whatever. I'm not a numbers guy. I'm an
Sure.
impact guy. And so
Sure.
what's been really cool about it is out of it has come coaching the bigger game program. So I've met some amazing people, and we're doing coaching the bigger game, which is effectively self-leadership, leading ourselves to make sure we're healthy, leading the individual to make sure each individual team player is healthy, going back to studying each player
Mm-hmm.
so that we can build a healthy team culture. Because if you try to build a healthy team culture with a toxic coach or toxic individuals, it's not going to have a very
Yeah.
healthy team. So that's something that has come out of it because of the relationships that I've built through it, because of the credibility that people have seen that, look, we're not doing this to make big bucks. We're doing this to help people.
Right.
And people have seen that, people know that, people understand that now. And I just love the relationships that I've been able to build. I mean, heck, we're talking here because we started it. And that's the beauty of these things, is that we're able to get out in front of people and impact lives that we may or may not ever meet these people. I mean, I have many friends who I still haven't met, that I say friends because we've had many conversations now. I have a good friend I had on the show from England,
Mm.
and he's a guy that I look forward to meeting in person someday. But until then, we're going to just continue having conversations together virtually. And that's something that happens because we have this great medium that we can use and do. So impact is, if you couldn't tell already, is what I'm all about. And that's what I love seeing already with the podcast. And so I'm going to keep doing it until I feel led to stop, which I don't think is anytime soon. So I just actually did an interview this morning, and I was talking to a guy about, hey, I can't wait to get you on in 5 years to see how all the
Yeah.
work you're doing has come to fruition, So that's
Yeah.
the hope, is we can continue to have these conversations for a really long time, and hope for the same for this, because I think this serves a great purpose here locally, and hopefully other people are listening to it elsewhere as well, because the episodes that I've listened to are fantastic.
We appreciate that, man. We definitely appreciate that. And obviously, we definitely appreciate everything you're doing. And it's been cool. This has been a cool conversation, just hearing your heart for your athletes, the teams that you coach, and then, like you said, anybody who's on the other end of that microphone, who's hearing what you're saying. And then, the cool thing too is every athlete that you impact, every listener you impact, they're going to impact someone else. And,
That's right.
that's one of the books we gave away at Character Combine a couple years ago called 1 in a Million, with this whole idea of like, hey, if you can impact one person, hopefully that person impacts people, and then they impact people. And then by the end of your life, through indirect contact, you've impacted 1 million people. So, and I can definitely say, just from this conversation we're having right now, man, that's definitely what you're doing. So we appreciate what you're doing, Coach. And we're just thankful that you're a part of our home team, and you're making such an incredible impact on all your athletes and the community. That being said, if people want to get, in contact with you, if they want to follow you and everything you're doing, both in your podcast and then, with your sports team, what are your social media handles, websites, all that stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, at Phil Darke, if you do that at pretty much any of the, whatever, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, it's, keep it simple on all those. How Soccer Explains Leadership. I think it's, if you just, search for How Soccer Explains Leadership on any of those two. HowSoccerExplainsLeadership.com is the website for the podcast. You can go check that out. You can also get it on any podcast app. If wherever you're listening to this podcast, you can just search it and it will pop up. And I would love for you to start listening to that as well. And you can just email me at phil@howsoccerexplainsleadership.com if you want to drop an email and connect about any of these things. Coachingthebiggergame.com if what I talked about there is interesting to you too. So there's a lot of different ways you can get a hold of me, any one of those, or just email me at that Phil at How Soccer Explains Leadership is probably the easiest. Before we go though, I'd be remiss to not shout out, as you talked about Character Combine, good friend Eric Frazier, and being able to do stuff.
Oh yeah.
I remember doing something with Kevin Bracey back at the Dwight Taylor's events back in the day.
Oh yeah. That's awesome.
One of the barbershop things that he was emceeing. So yeah, I just love what all the things that have been going on with that over the years as well. And yeah, the multiplication is absolutely what our common hearts, that it's not just about doing one thing for one person, but being able to, that is important, absolutely. But the hope is that my heart really is to pour into the other coaches, other people, to be able to multiply that out, and have the coach that impacts hundreds as well, and then those kids will impact hundreds, and go on from there. So
for sure, that's a great group of guys that you're connected with, and that's awesome. I didn't realize we had all of those connections in common. That's awesome.
Yeah. And Eric Frazier, we it's funny, going way back. So Eric, if you're listening, brother, shout out to you. And he connected me initially with all these guys. So it's been a blast.
That's awesome. We had Eric on a podcast almost 3 years ago. I think he was one of our first guests on Character Combine. So that's funny.
I remember that one.
I haven't talked to him for a minute, so we may have to get him on this podcast at some point.
I think you should.
That's awesome, man. And hey, and I just want to mention, because I don't know if you guys coaches forgot listening to this, but like Phil was talking about, he's a certified a DISC assessment. Is it a trainer?
DISC consultant. Yeah. Consultant. Whatever you want to call it.
I think that's a really important tool that he has the ability to conduct. So if you guys are interested in that, I would definitely highly recommend doing that for your teams. I think that would be an excellent way to get even more connected to your athletes. So just, I don't want that to go unsaid one more time. I mean, I had to at least mention that again before we get out of here.
I appreciate that. I agree, but that's just because I've seen the impact of it, done it all over the country and actually all over the world. And it's amazing how helpful it is to just get a real head start and confirmation on understanding your players. So,
and it's really in depth. I've done it one time, and I didn't have someone going through the results with me like you would, but it's pretty in-depth stuff. It's impressive what it can do. So I highly recommend that. So Coach, thank you so much again for taking some time to chat with us, and good luck with everything that's coming up. And we'll continue to follow you and everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.